Why do traditional martial arts fail? I'm going to share my ideas as to why this seems to happen, at least in my opinion. And it happens with pretty much any traditional martial art that had a traditional heritage that was used in warfare and was taught traditionally. Just comparing traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, uh, these two arts share most of the techniques. Like the newaza of Japanese jiu-jitsu is the same like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's the same grappling techniques because they work. Plus things that Brazilian jiu-jitsu does not address, simply because this Japanese art was used in more situations than just sport competition. It was used in many different situations. So it's not that it's lacking the techniques that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has. It just has more of the techniques that were used for different stuff, like disarming, battlefield fighting, whatever. Just like different esoteric things that have rare percentage of use in combat sports, but nonetheless have had their efficiency historically. If you have a codified martial art that tried to encompass everything that happens in fighting, that martial art would want to address every possible situation that might come up. You wouldn't want to ignore a certain element of fighting if you're holding to that ideal of securing the history of these movements. For instance, like comparing a kotegaeshi takedown with a double leg takedown. Like, we evidently see that double legs are more effective in the sense of percentage of use, and kotegaeshi is way harder to pull off, and it takes a specific situational dance for it to happen. But it does work. It's just harder to pull off because it's a specific thing that needs specific circumstances for it to work. And if you look at the kotegaeshi movement, you will find that in essentially every traditional martial art that was actually used in warfare, from any culture that had a long history of it. It's in every form of kung fu. Chin-na has kotegaeshi, Japanese jiu-jitsu has all the variations of jiu-jitsu, like all grappling arts in the history of the world have the kotegaeshi in their syllabus of movement. So there has to be an actual function for it. But here is the problem. When you have these traditional martial arts that emphasize teaching through tradition, so my teacher taught it this way, so I'm going to teach the same way, and that student is going to teach the same way, and we're going to keep this lineage going. And why the function of a lot of these techniques gets lost, in my estimation, is precisely because of the traditional teaching. Maybe the first teacher, hypothetically speaking, the first teacher actually taught it correctly. But if you have an explicit focus on teaching because an authority says it that way, and you pass that down, and it keeps going, the chances are of somebody getting it wrong, the chances of that are pretty damn high. But if instead of that you were teaching it based on the principles of body mechanics and the principles of testing it out, pressuring, sparring, actually getting in there and testing these movements regardless of the traditionality of it, you would have a better chance of passing it down correctly, because you yourself would have assessed the situation each time. And that's why I think that in a lot of these traditional martial arts, that stuff gets lost. And then you have visible movements that do appear to be almost correct, but there's elements of setting it up, minute details, and time of usage that usually is wrong. Because, for instance, when you look at an Aikido demonstration, when they do their kotegaeshi, and when we do our Jiu-Jitsu kotegaeshi technique, conceptually it's the same, but only conceptually. Because if you're actually being completely pedantic and precise, it's not really the same. There's minute details that are different. There's ways that you have to set up the technique, to hold it, to do it, and none of that is displayed in most of Aikido demonstrations. But that doesn't mean that the Kotegaeshi technique doesn't work. For instance, like you can teach a double leg badly. You can teach somebody a really, really bad double leg, and they test it out and it doesn't work. You can't go, well, double leg suddenly is a trash technique. No, you're doing it wrong. And there's a lot of that in traditional martial arts that probably has happened because of the passing down from generation to generation. Or in terms of like Ueshiba's Aikido, it's more of a traditional meditational practice through the motions that were used in combat. So Aikido gets a pass in that sense, where it's not actually meant for fighting. At least the main Aikido that most people recognize, not counting Tomiki Aikido or whatever. But yeah, that's just some of my thoughts on why we see a lot of traditional stuff fail. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Tan, tan. Cazzo da muziku na ovo. Ah!